But I have a question.
Yes.
Were you just talking about the climate change paper or the other one?
Yes. Well, somebody had asked me if we were, um, wait, I'm just trying to see if this thing is recording or not. Yeah, I think it is. All right. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Based on here, it's recording.
Okay, perfect. I couldn't tell. Mine is, anyway. Yeah, Jonathan. So we were just talking a little bit about people's individual papers, and then the research stuff we're talking about is actually for this last paper. So I have posted, and I'll show you that in a minute. I have posted some um, examples of people's papers last time that might help you. Um, some of them are going to be a little scary because they're long. Some people wrote 8-page papers, but I only could post what I had. And then some people's papers are not so strong. So I think I put 4 papers on that'll help you. Um, yeah, so last time we talked about research and kind of we went to the library. Did we go to the library website last time? No, right? So maybe we'll go to that this time and make a little practice ourselves. Okay, so let me share with you guys. Actually, while I'm talking to you, I think now I'll go ahead and do that. Okay. Um, hmm. So I think what we'll do is we'll go to the library website. If I can, it's underneath this thing. There. Wow. I'm going to stop the share for a minute. At the top of my screen, what happens is I can't go anywhere because it covers it. So, okay, so let me just go there now. All right, and so now I can share. So what we're going to do, because I don't think we did this, is we're going to, we talked about how to do searches and things like that, but I don't think we actually went there and did it. So here's your main page at Southwestern on the website. And if you go to student support right there and you click on it, you can come down to library. If you click on library, it's going to bring you to this opening page here. And because because it's closed now, you could do it this way. This is kind of the old way to do the search, the general keyword or whatever you might use. You have choices, and then you type in your keywords and you hit go. You can do it that way. Or you can go this way. So we're going to go this way because that's what she had suggested. So we'll click on this one. That's going to bring us to this page. And then at the top here, we have choices of the sort of research we want. So if you want an ebook or a textbook, you can click on this one. Articles and databases are there. And so these are kind of our 2 choices. I'm going to click on articles and databases there. And so then I have to click one more time. We can do it by topic over here, but I'm not thinking that we are sure about our topic. For some of what you're looking at, the newspaper right there will be a good way to start. But we want to let's just do a search first and see what we're thinking. So if we click on this one and pull it down, we have to put in some words here. So I'm going to put in climate change solutions because when you think about mitigating climate change, what we're really looking for is solutions. Mitigation has to do with not necessarily adapting, but slowing the process down. The other thing that's very similar to mitigating is adapting. And that's where, for instance, if tornadoes or things like that were coming, you build a cement area, a cement room. They do this in those areas where they have a lot of tornadoes. And when the tornado comes, you go inside that little cement room. That would be adapting to climate change, adapting to adverse weather. Mitigating would be to try to slow it down in some way, to try to make it, not get any worse. So for instance, solar would be something instead of instead of getting solar from the sun, instead of electric plants that are run by coals, things like that. So we're going to look at, I'm interested in this climate change solutions, just as a general thing. But I want that in the title, because if I put it as a keyword, it's going to give me a whole lot of stuff. It's definitely not the author. It's already got full text clicked, so I'm going to click on that and see what comes up. Now your search terms may not be the best search terms, so you may change them eventually. But we're going to start with this one because we are interested in solutions. So this is talking about solution to climate change. It's got one, carbon farming. It has 663 articles. And then if we wanted to, if we come down here a bit, so it says full text, yeah, we want all that. It's got these years, 1997 to 2020. So that's about 25 years. We could probably do that, but I think maybe we don't want it so old. So if we just change this year right there, I think maybe, what do you think? 2005? Let's just try that one. Whoops, 1200, that's no good. So we're going to do that. It's going to change our years a little bit. I don't think it's going to reduce much. Actually, it gave us more. Not sure why. Over here we have apply equivalent subjects and search within the full text of the article, so it'll find information on it that may not be obvious in the title. And you can try it this way. If it doesn't work so well, you might decide I don't want search within the article, because sometimes when you search within the article, it's just going to be random. Won't be what you want. So we have that going on. We could have scholarly review, peer-reviewed if we wanted to make sure it's high-end research. Sometimes the problems with high-end research is that, it can get to be over your head. If you look at the source type over here, it's giving you some choices. You could just go from the news, which would probably be news databases, newswires, things like that. Magazines, which are less formal than academic journals, but still, some of those magazines are good. Trade publications, and maybe we wouldn't use those. Books probably, so I'm not going to mark any of these out. Leave them alone. And then over here, if I'm looking at, it says limit by subject. Do I just want climate change solutions in terms of global temperature changes? Do I actually want climate change? Am I interested in global warming? Would I be interested in greenhouse gases? And then we can click here, and there's going to be more choices. So we could, but you notice that it's not a lot of sources there. So once you start going down, you're really narrowing what you're doing. Here's one on air pollution if you wanted to know something about that. So we're going to get out of, I'm not going to change it right now. I'm going to see what I've got. And if we look at these things, I mean, that first one was good. This one's not too bad. It's talking about urban forests. So they're talking about planting trees in the city, which maybe is a good idea. This one's talking about e-waste. I'm not sure why women is in it, but probably because they're working on it. And other than carbon farming, and some of these things seem to be kind of maybe not what I want. So maybe I'm thinking, I don't know that I want carbon farming. So the best thing to do is you go to your Google thing and type in something like I did this, terms for climate change, terms for mitigating climate change. That seems like a good thing, because what that's going to do is give me ideas before I go into my database. And right now I'm going into my database really with no good ideas. When that librarian was showing us the video, I think she mentioned very casually that you may want other words like for mitigation or climate change like that. And if you go to Google, you can get them. That's true, but she didn't show you how to do it. And so this is kind of the best way to do it. I would just say terms. What are other terms for these things? Um, and they're going to explain some stuff to you that you probably need to know. Climate change mitigation usually involves reductions in human emissions of greenhouse gases. And the reason that's important is because um, the natural process, of the world, things grow, things die. Green things like trees and grass and plants um, absorb carbon dioxide and release the oxygen. So what happens is when we lose trees, for instance, lose a lot of trees. So in California, we've been losing trees based on a water shortage. They can't grow and there's not enough water. So we've been losing millions of trees that way. And now, of course, because it's gotten hotter, we're having a lot of fires. So what that's going to do in the long run in California is make it hotter because the trees were absorbing the CO2, which is the greenhouse gas. And remember, the easiest way to think about that is like a blanket. It's a blanket that if it were covering the earth, and the earth is round, but this blanket's round, it covers it. So it lets heat come in, but it also traps heat. It doesn't let a lot of heat go out. That's why we want a blanket. The problem with the earth is that the CO2 and the methane that's causing those greenhouse gases, that blanket gets thicker and thicker and then it gets hotter and hotter inside. So that's what's going on based on human emissions, driving cars, our industries, the things that we're doing, all is producing greenhouse gases. So we're in a way sort of shooting ourselves in our foot. We're causing our own misery. Um, and so I want to know what that is. Strategies. Now, these are another word. Strategies might be good. Mitigation strategies when you do your search for climate change. So if we look at that just to find out what it is, it's going to give you some ideas. So retrofitting buildings to make them more energy efficient. I'm not sure what impact that would have or how much it would cost. Adopting renewable resources like solar, wind, and small hydro. So solar we're doing all over California. They're doing it in a lot of other places. Anything like the southern part of the United States or the far west can do this. Once you install it, stuff's good for a long time. It's guaranteed for 25 years to work at 80%, and it doesn't stop working after that. So we're looking at it pretty far in the future. And I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with it, but they're developing shingles that you can put on your house for your roof so you won't need solar panels anymore. All the new houses that are being built, I forget the year, but it's pretty soon, in California, must be solar. So we are doing things that we can. And then wind power in Texas is huge. Produces a lot of their energy needs, and they also sell quite a bit of it, which is sort of odd because Texas is also a large oil producing state. They're talking about hydro, and all of these things in terms of solutions are good ideas. They're talking about small hydro, so you would be putting those, say, in running water like a river or trying to set up a dam. You could actually put much larger ones. Outside New England, they were thinking, I don't know if they've done it yet, but there's a strong ocean current that goes there. And so they were thinking if they put some large generators out there and attached it with a cable to the coast so they could actually float out there, or they could actually anchor them to the ocean floor. Those things would just produce forever, as long as you could keep things out of it. So again, that's sort of free. The wind is free, the solar is free. I mean, it would make things really cheap also once you paid for your equipment. So these are some ideas that you might want to investigate. All of these reduce greenhouse gases. Helping cities develop more sustainable transport. When we're thinking about, places in the Midwest like North Dakota, I mean, there's not a lot of people, so there's not a lot of cars on the road. California is different. If we were looking at Los Angeles or even San Diego, we have all kinds of cars on the road. Back in the 70s, 1970s, if you looked at LA, especially if you weren't from LA, you would notice that you couldn't breathe. I mean, it was just like a fog was all over everything. Um, and you know, the cars burned, I think, more gas. They're less, didn't, we didn't have those mechanisms to control pollution back then. So any kind of business that, you know, produced electricity or produced a product, you know, that stuff just went out in the air. So we passed laws for that. We developed Environmental Protection Agency, and the air got pretty good. In fact, the air is pretty good for you guys compared to what it was in the 1970s. So we can actually fix things if we want to, if we have a will to do it. But things like maybe more, you know, bus rapid transit they're talking about, but where we don't use individual cars anymore, where we either ride share or that kind of stuff. But or maybe just like working from home now, for instance, is saving a lot of that CO2. Electric vehicles are a good idea, but the problem with electric vehicles right now is that production of the battery produces all kinds of pollutants. It's a really toxic process, so we're not so sure about that. This biofuels I'm kind of interested in, because biofuels would mean that we would turn plants or plant products into something that would burn, and the net production of CO2 would be it would be an even balance sheet, because they're already going to decompose and they already release their CO2. If we just use them, then we wouldn't increase the CO2 in the carbon dioxide in the air. So if our cars could burn that, you know, that would be a big solution, although it's controversial. And then promoting more sustainable uses of land, especially with agriculture. Fertilizer is a big problem for pollution and for our environment. For instance, in the Chesapeake Bay, and Virginia is a very old state, so that was one of the first states. So they used to do, well, they still do farming there, but the fertilizer that they use on the, you know, the farms has found its way into the Chesapeake Bay. And what it does is it causes a lot of pollution. It causes algae to grow. If too much algae grows, then the fish can't breathe. So it's a real problem. So Chesapeake Bay is kind of what they call a petri dish. It's full of all kinds of you know, bacteria and things that are unhealthy. Interesting thing about Chesapeake Bay is we get a lot of our seafood from Chesapeake Bay. So when you think about it, those shellfish are eating all that stuff, concentrating in their bodies. And so when we eat shrimp or oysters or things like that, even the fish, then that's becoming concentrated in our bodies. So we don't get away from any of this stuff. It's part of our problem. So this is giving you a bunch of ideas just by looking here on Google, things to do. If you're not sure of the difference between what happens to make the climate, you know, increase or decrease naturally, we could click on this and it will talk about that. And it talks about the sort of natural things, volcanic eruptions, ocean currents. As we change our orbit, that can influence our climate. Going from certain areas that go from hot to cold, not completely, but a lot like that. Anytime solar variations, so when we have solar flashes and things like that from the sun, or occasionally we'll have more sun than normal or less. Yeah. And so all of that stuff. So we could look into that if we were interested in that, you know, to try to figure out where we are. This is interesting. What's the biggest contributor to climate change? And it is accumulation in the atmosphere of the greenhouse gases, especially resulting from humans burning fossil fuels, as the predominant cause of global warming and climate change. That's a predominant reason why we're having all this problem. So really all we have to do is stop the fossil fuels. If we could do that, we would effectively mitigate in many ways. Now, mitigation doesn't mean that what we haven't started won't go away. In other words, we could get hotter before we get cooler, but at least we could stop the speed of increase. Top three contributors to CO2 emissions. So this might be helpful looking at this. Country-wise, Saudi Arabia produces lots of oil, CO2. Australia, I don't know why that would be. United States is way up there in Canada. So these are the countries that need to do the most to reduce the CO2. Now this is per person. So China produces altogether more than all of this, but per person, we're up there. Okay, so looking down here, if we just look at this stuff here, this NASA article right here is really good. And it provides a background. So if you don't know much about climate change, what we're doing about it, just the science of it, this would be good, just a quick read, not that you go through the whole thing, but looking at it. And so it's got some information on the site. It's talking about how long this has been going on. And it mentions some things that are pretty scary. This 400 parts per million, it's the first time in human history that we've ever had that much carbon in the atmosphere, which means that's why we're having these problems. Nobody was worried about climate change until we had all these people using all these fossil fuels. So it was that high one time 3 to 5 million years ago, but that was when we had a lot of volcanoes and things going on, which puts ash up and stuff like the cuts. So that's a real concern. What that represents is so many degrees of increase in the average temperature of the Earth, and it won't take many degrees of average temperature increase to cause us to really go into a tailspin where we can't grow food because we can't depend on when are we going to have rain, when is it going to be hot, when is it going to be cold. We won't be able to depend on it. So that's something you could look into if you were interested in it. And then, so they've got some other information here. There's some articles that are interesting articles. Things the community can do. Cleaning the air would limit short-term climate warming. Now, notice that's short-term climate warming, because a lot of the stuff that we've done over the last 50 years, you can't do much with it. Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff that you can do. We'll get out of this site now. Oops, I didn't mean to get out of it totally. I wanted to show you one more thing on this page, because what did come up, which was interesting. As we go down the page, we're going to get to the point where it says, see, there's 7 solutions to climate change. We click on this one. There's your 7 solutions. This is Scientific American, so we know that's a really good article. We click on that one just to see what they're talking about. Clean power plants, getting rid of the coal power plants would be really important. Okay. Here's that. Okay. And then things we could do locally, which we're doing quite a bit. And it's talking about how to generate electricity again from wind, sun, and geothermal heat, which is when if we drilled holes down in the earth, we could probably produce some like that. So there's a bunch of ideas. Controlling methane leaks is huge. The Trump administration has just reduce the restrictions that the EPA put in place. And so methane is much worse than CO2 in creating that blanket. Um, but so this is a great idea, but now the industry doesn't have to worry about that. So, so there's another big problem. Tougher emission and efficiency standards. Okay, this would be great, but and the EPA was doing it, but um, with the Trump administration, they're not interested in this, and so they're weakening our EPA. The more we weaken these rules that they've set up to protect us, the more we're going to be prone to suffering these effects of the climate change, especially the heat, um, lack of water, things like that that go with it. Um, greener farming, so different ways to farm than the way we're doing. Um, precision agriculture, so there's a bunch of stuff you can do with agriculture. You can do something that's called, it is a kind of a carbon farming. So what you would do is you grow certain crops to, instead of using fertilizer that you're going to plow back into the soil. And then you reduce the soil will store the CO2, which the plants will use. And again, you'll have a net, a negative net, or a net zero impact of CO2. Farms are also going to be growing energy crops. So biofuels are based on plants. Corn is a big one that's used. In fact, Venezuela, which actually produces quite a bit of oil, for many years, they just used their biofuels. They sold the oil to us. Okay, and so there's some other ideas on here. If we go back to the site itself, here's more solutions. We can click on this one. It says Green America. I'm not sure if that's good. This is the top 10 solutions to reverse. It says reverse, which I don't know that's possible. Refrigerants, those things create holes in our atmosphere, which really lets the sun right in. And that's a problem. And so they're called CFCs and HCFCs. So we don't really produce those anymore, but we have so many old refrigerators and things like that, things that keep things cool, that we're still using it. So that's something. And see, notice how it tells you solutions in progress, work to be done, and then impact. And there's some facts right in this. So you'd save 900 billion net savings. That's pretty cool, just from refrigerant leaks. Wind turbines onshore, it's talking about that, what they can generate, work that needs to be done, impact. This is a huge amount of money. So the cost would be 1.2 trillion, but you'd save $7.4 trillion. That's pretty huge. And you reduce the CO2 in big ways. So these are powerful things to talk about. Reducing food waste would be important. So the food we waste contributes 4.4 gigatons, if you can imagine that, of CO2 into the atmosphere. 8% of all of greenhouse emissions is based on what we throw away, because that's going to rot. When it rots, everything that decomposes releases the CO2. So that's a real issue. Plus, people are hungry. Why would we do that? So again, it goes through that stuff for you. Adoption of a plant-rich diet. We really have to stop eating meat as much as we do, especially red meat. Things like chicken and fish, fine. We can have as much of that as we want, probably. But red meat's the problem. Production of red meat produces all kinds of CO2. That would be, just that one thing would help our global warming all by itself. So, yep. So it's got some facts there for you. Tropical forest reforestation, which they were doing for a while. But now, the countries where the rainforests grow have been cutting it down. And that's a huge problem for two reasons. One is we get a lot of our air from that, our oxygen. I think it's 15% or maybe 20% of all of our oxygen comes from that rainforest, which they're cutting down. So what that's going to mean is, in terms of good air, we're going to have 15-20% less. Not sure what things would still be breathable. I mean, these are the issues. So, but that is an idea. Educating women is important just because women are the ones that educate the rest of the people, their children. And so we learn more about what we need to do. That's a very powerful thing. Family planning. So family planning is important. We have too many people. All these people are producing all this CO2. So that might be something to look at. All right. So you can see how easy it is to find some solutions. And then if we go down here, there's more solutions. You want to make sure that you don't, go to a site that's pretty crummy. We don't want to do that. Let's see. Now, I don't suggest Wikipedia for much, but I do think for basic stuff, it's not a bad idea. So if we pulled up Wikipedia here, it's going to give you all kinds of background there. That's really nice. Now, these are not reviewed pieces, which is why why college doesn't like Wikipedia. If it were a reviewed piece, we'd probably like it quite a bit. I think eventually it will be reviewed, but right now it's not. But if you look at this, it looks pretty good. So you're required to have 6 sources for your research paper. This can't be one of them, but if you do use it, it would be your 7th source, so it doesn't count as those first 6. Still, it gives you lots of information. And if we look at the table of contents, which is really nice, then we can look at things like fossil fuel substitution, low carbon energy sources. We could click on that. That might be good for us. And then decarbonization of how we heat or transport things. That might be good. How to conserve energy might be good. Carbon sinks, that's sort of a new thing and going to be a big thing. There are natural carbon sinks. What a carbon sink does is absorb the carbon and then concentrate it so that it's not in the air anymore. There are ways to do that and ways to store it. We're developing through our technology ways to do that, but it's super expensive. I doubt anybody's going to have that money. But that's when they're talking about carbon dioxide removal. It's through these carbon sinks. Agriculture, it doesn't say much there, but we were talking about that a bit. So those things. And then government action, we're not doing much anymore. If the government doesn't support what we're doing, then people are probably, they'll do things on their own, but it won't be a big thing. So this is not a bad article. And then if you go to the bottom of it, all the way to the bottom, look at all these sources you've got if you wanted to kind of look through them. This one's about livestock farming and their environment and the environmental impact. That'd be interesting because then you'd find out about meat, the production of meat, and actually what it does. So, so there's some good stuff just by doing this, and you're not really using this that much. And then if I went back to my, if I went back to this and say, well, what I really want, I want to have something different. So I'm going to do a new search. New search. And what I really want is, yeah, I would like to have climate change. So I'm going to type that in. Or global warming. And I want to have mitigating. Or, I'm going to put in or. reduction. And if you notice when I'm typing it in, it's suggesting other ideas. And I don't have biofuels because that's what I'm interested in. I want all of that. So I'm going to go there. I'm going to search, see what comes up. Okay, I have 10,000 things here, which seems like a lot. I'm going to go down to my subjects and limit by subject down here. Go down a little bit. And I'm going to look and see if I have biofuels under there. I have fossil fuels. So I'm thinking I don't like my search then. So I'm going to change this just to climate change. It's probably too large. Climate change. I'm going to go to, I'm going to keep mitigating. And I'm going to try biofuels. Whoops. And I'm going to do a search. Now I only have 1,000. Let's see if this is anything that I want. Still don't have what I want. So I'm going to go back and do a different search altogether. And I'm going to try this a different way. So I'm going to go this way. And I'm going to put a plus. I'm going to put biofuels, see what I come up with. Well, didn't go in there. I only have 17, so I'd have to expand this one, but at least I have biofuels, which is what I was interested in. If I change this and I said what I really want is this to be in my title, I only have one. So you have to be kind of careful what you do here, or you're going to eliminate all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to go back to subject terms. Okay, so this isn't working out at all. Don't like this at all, search. Okay, we have 10. And this is more exactly what I want. So Here's mitigating climate change through methane and black carbon emission controls. There's biofuels, what to do with that. um, this is new growth engines, so that's going to work for me. This is interesting. It's bringing up beef production, so that might be something you guys are interested in. So I think you can see that this searching can be a little frustrating if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. I would probably just type in biofuels and see what they say about that. Just go that way. Okay. So I would like to have two databases, that you at least found two databases. This is not a class that's really going to learn that much about mitigating climate change. We really want to write a paper, so we're more interested in that. So again, if you looked at the results from Google and you typed in just those things, you would probably find what you wanted. Any questions on that?
No.
No. It's boring, isn't it?
No, I'm just cutting it off because I have a crazy background.
Oh, yeah, me too. Okay. All right, so let me just go through some other stuff. I'll show you some other stuff. Okay. So we want to get out of that. We're going to go away from that one. And we want to go to this. And what we want to do is look at our files a little bit. So we have a lot of stuff on our files that if you weren't here last class, you noticed the visual analysis, we have that, but now we have these are folders. If you click on this one, it's going to bring up stuff there. So the climate change essay directions, I think we went over last time. I'll just pull it up so you can see what it looks like. Maybe. So this is general directions. What I'm going to be doing for you guys, because the other class asked for this, and I think it makes sense. So we have all this kind of stuff. It tells you basically what to do. It gives you some parameters, so we know it's going to be, it says 15 to 1,700 words. I want at least 1,200 words minimum. And you're going to be you're going to be comparing two essays. After you do all your research, you're going to have two ideas. Say you're going to think that we're going to have to stop growing so much meat. So that's one of your ideas. And when you do the research on that, it's going to say, well, it's going to cost this much. The results are going to be like that. It's going to take this much time before it's effective. Okay, good. So you looked at that. And then you find this article that's talking about how we can grow this really incredible plant in the ocean. Some sort of single cell plant, or maybe whatever it is. And if we can release enough of these things out there, they will get rid of all the pollution. They'll eat it up. And in that way, the ocean will recover and be able to produce the oxygen that's always produced. That'd be excellent if we could do that. So you look at that, and it talks about, well, once we get this underway, really, really developed, we can drop them in the areas where there's significant pollution. So we'll just take this in a plane and we'll drop it in a sack. The sack will decompose, it will release all this stuff. It will replicate, and eventually all that stuff, whatever it was, will go away. That'd be wonderful. So it turns out that that would actually make the oceans better, and the oceans produce 50% of our oxygen. Extremely important in our air. So the more polluted the oceans become, and that oceans is large, but we're managing to do it, again, the more stress there will be on our ability to have reasonable oxygen. Where are we going to get it from? It's not the ocean. It's not the rainforest. Where are we going to get it from? So we'd really be at a loss at that point. So at some point, we have to take care of the earth, as they say. So those might be two really good ideas. The growing that special organism would take a while. It's going to cost a lot of money, but the impact is going to be huge. All right, so that sounds good. On the other hand, if we just stop doing the meat or try to, and part of the problem is you've got to persuade people that, you know, this meat that you're eating is going to kill you. Not, well, sure, in terms of your heart, but it's really going to kill you in terms of what it's doing through the environment. And so with enough information that way, and showing them that, well, in maybe 2 or 3 years, we can have significant impact. If we just stopped growing so much meat, if people had more like beans and rice or something like that for meals, which are whole proteins, um, the earth would be healthier. We could stabilize where we are. It doesn't mean that we would never have meat. It just means we wouldn't have that much meat, or we would start to have that fake meat. I don't know if you guys have ever had the, I think it's Burger King, isn't it, that does the fake hamburger? I don't know if you've ever tried it, but it's pretty good. It actually tastes, unless somebody tells you it's not the meat, you're okay with it. Um, so you would be looking at these two things, and you want to compare them in terms of, uh, you know, how well do they mitigate, you know, the evidence for the mitigation. Um, and so talk about the results, what the arguments are, in what ways the effects might be similar or different. And I do think that time and money and results are what you're really looking at. Um, and then what can we learn from analyzing one against the other? So we know that stopping the meat might have an immediate impact and maybe significant impact, but the new plant would have the most impact. So the question is where do we put our resources? What do we do? And so you guys are going to make an argument. You're supposed to evaluate which one's more effective. So so you could say it this way. You could say, well, in the short term, stopping that meat production is going to be really effective. Somebody else might argue that, you know, if we could do something with our transportation, that's, what is it, 15 to 25% of our CO2 in our country comes from that. That would help our country out really fast, but can we do it? So that's the other problem. Your ideas might be really good. Can we convince the public? What would be the obstacle in doing that? So those are the kind of discussions you're having when you're talking about which one's more effective. Okay, and then if the topics are fairly close in their result, one might extend. So we're talking about mitigating climate change from the perspective of stop eating so much meat, stop growing so much meat, and that's going to do so much. And then if we then look at the that new organism that's going to clean up the ocean, we would say, well, the results would be extended from this one to that. So this is a good idea. That's even a better idea. Corroborate would be if they were both talking about the same thing. If they both agreed on the same thing, you would use that term. Complicate would mean when we look at one versus another, having this new information kind of complicates what we were thinking about the other one. Like maybe we thought it was a great idea, but maybe now not so great idea. Contradict means they're just totally different. Or correct means one says the other one's wrong. And in a way, you might be doing that. You might be saying, well, this thing about the new plant is wonderful, but you know, we need to make the change now. We can't really wait 10 years, you know, for production to ramp up and all that. So we're going to be looking at these perspectives, not necessarily that either one would be wrong, but you have to argue which one would be right or the better choice. You're going to have 6 secondary sources. Some of that research we were looking at, and then over the weekend, I need to put out these articles for these other people we're working on. It'll give you ideas also. So those are the directions, but I am going to post up an outline for you. So this is the stuff we were kind of looking at last time. These should be, I think, did I change? Yeah. So these should be some articles that people had. Yep, so this is that one we were just talking about. Why haven't we stopped climate change? And it says, we just don't empathize with our descendants. In other words, I suppose if you have children, maybe you do, but a lot of people don't. They figure it was hard for me, and they're going to have their challenges. They're going to have to deal with it. I'm dealing with mine. A lot of people have that attitude. So it's hard for people to see very far in front of their face. And they don't necessarily want to believe it because it would mean that they would have to change their lifestyle. And people don't want to. So this is an interesting article just to sort of look through. It might be something you can actually use in yours. Um, there's going to be a bunch of those on here, but they'll be um, kind of dedicated to specific topics. And then I put on here some examples for you guys. So if I clicked on this one, and she was in my evening class, if you notice, it's 8 pages, which is a lot. But it's a great example to look at how she does her introduction. She orients you to these issues. She has a 1-sentence summary of each one of these articles she's going to be looking at. One is about changing your diet. The other one is about we're using water in the drought, but we don't have to waste our water. There are better ways to use it so that we could. So anyway, she does that, and then and here's her argument statement. In order to mitigate climate change, it's necessary to begin by cutting red meat production and consumption. So she's going to argue for that one over the other one. Okay. And here's her explanation of the first article, summary. And this is I don't know what this is. This is more information, I suppose. And so what she did was she presented her first article and she backed it up with some information. And here's her second article, and she's making a summary of that. And then she's explaining about it, I think, is how she's doing it. And now she's getting into her information. So this is one of her reasons for doing it. Okay, so she kind of goes through that. She has both sides. Here's her, she's talking about other strategies because that's one of the things you would do. So she's talking about the storing of CO2 from power plants and sources, how we might do that. And then I think this is her conclusion. And that's her works cited page. Now she's got this one a little backwards because it's old fashioned. So you're supposed to have it over all the way to the edge now, and this goes in. All right, so there's a bunch of those articles up there that you can look at just as an example to see, okay, how are they doing it? All right, you guys have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Jonathan.
So we're looking at articles you're giving us, and then we're doing our own research?
I'm going to give you some articles just because I'm not sure you're going to find all these ideas. But you're required to do your own research, yeah. I don't mind if you use 1 or 2 of these articles. I don't mind if you do that, especially they might be really good. And you can count that in your 6. So say 2 articles. You're still responsible for 4 more. That would be your own. And that would really be your backup, like you're testing it. You're trying to make sure, hey, is this true? Is this really good? And then, so what we want to do maybe over the weekend is and I know you guys are finishing papers too, but do a little research on this. Do a little search, and then you can do the Google thing if that's all you have time for. Once you have a good topic, that's when I think I would go to the databases. So if I had just gone to the database and typed in biofuels, I'd learn some things. That would probably be all I needed. I'm finding this new search thing, the way they've set it up, to be a little more difficult than the old way was. So, but it works. I mean, it does work. And then if you're going to do these searches, I want to remind you that you've got in your files let's see, under the citation thing. We have a couple of things from the library. We've got these handouts, these 2 handouts that she gave us. I put something on quoting and paraphrasing that we're going to cover maybe next time. I think we went through these things last time. So that stuff. Okay. So just kind of go through this and see what you've got. You got a bunch of stuff. Library instruction stuff. So you got videos that we looked at last time, I believe. And then this thing right here on the bottom of this is the one that the library put on for us. If we clicked on this thing, and you would see that it's the whole thing. It's really useful if you haven't done anything like this before. You can just watch it. You can also speed through it. So it's 54 minutes long, but you can speed through it. You can see what you want. And by the way, on the side right over here, if I just wanted to go down, it's all, everything she says is there's a transcript right there. So I can go through it a little bit if I wanted to just go like this. Whoops.
You for replying in the chat. Okay.
She was trying to do
and I want to minimize this. There. Okay. So as you see, I opened up the Southwestern Library web page. It's very easy to get to here. Probably you use it all the time. You just Google it, and from here, I'm going to show you how to get to the library. You see the red tabs up here. It says student support. And if you go down a little bit, you see library.
There you go. Yeah, she shows you how to do it. So you have lots of resources there. We had an exercise we wanted to work with today, but I don't know if we have time for that. And I don't think it's necessary until you... Alejandro, you got a question?
No, man, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you. I was just listening to anything else. Anybody like any other questions?
All right. Yeah, sure. You know, there's noise in the background here too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I will post this thing up. I think we've done a lot today. I think if we do too much more, it's going to be a little overwhelming. So I'm going to stop recording it, and